in the past had a moniker I went by called TRQ, which means the right question. A pseudo name for entertainment purposes, trying to make a political point conservatively between the Democrats and Republicans in the early 90s and how we approach things. Sometimes you're always looking for an answer, but you've got to ask the right questions. Of course, lawyers understand that in litigation, police understand that in interrogation, and doctors understand that in diagnoses, right? Trying to ask the right question to figure something out. Oftentimes, in some sort of audition or contest, there's a period of query where it's also going to be dependent on the answers that you give, the oral exam, as they say. So it's important sometimes if you want to get the right answer, just ask a certain question or how you frame the question and then how people react to that question and their responses. So I think in life, sometimes you can look at things rather statically and only ask in a very general form or a stasis form of just the general populist view or um, the reigning bias, the confirmation cognitive bias that exists socially and culturally, just from wanting to fit in or not be the outlier in a group of your peers. And so oftentimes you're not going to get the best answer that way.
You said the best answer, and that makes me think, based on what you said, think of how many times people talk about who's the best, whatever, right? Fill in the blank. And it goes based on what you said, the popular bias. Well, Tom Cruise, he's the best actor. Tom Brady, he's the best, whatever. I'm sure you can find another Tom, right? But, well, what defines the best? If you go based on math, logic, science, and you actually look at it mathematically, numbers don't lie. But if best is just what you define based on what you like, what is the most popular, well, then best would be what people agree on. So, well, the best question. I think the best question is what's for dinner, right? I mean, how many people would say that?
And when you say best acting, well, what constitutes best acting? Henry Fonda does no acrobatic stunts in 12 Angry Men. It's considered one of the best movies ever made. Tom Cruise does Top Gun, Maverick, and a few other things where he's dancing, moving, jumping, flying around, all kinds of crazy acrobatics. So, famous for what? Famous for acting in what area, in what way? He might be the best stunts actor, the best acrobatic actor. He might even have the best face. But Henry Fonda, not as handsome as Tom Cruise. Henry Fonda, no acrobatics, no jumping, no backflips, no flying in a squirrel suit off a 20,000 peak mountain. But if you look at acting at its core and what it really is, Henry Fonda, in that general sense, would be the better actor. Tom Cruise made more money. He made popular films, very popcorn type movies, not too deep, just fun, exhilarating, full of adrenaline. Whereas Henry Fonda made you think. So if your definition of acting is just pure popcorn entertainment, well, Tom Cruise might win that vote more than likely. Depends on what you're judging by. If you're looking at someone playing a role so convincingly, so persuasively, and can captivate you just by their words, well, Henry Fonda might win that one. Not a lot of people are going to make his movies $1 billion box office blockbuster. So, your definition, what's the best preacher? Someone who gives really good information or someone who entertains you? You like the way they sound, their accent, or their voice. But what about the one who's been serving God his whole life? Is it really the consummation of some young guy who sounds real good and looks real good, and you call him the best preacher, or someone who's been living their life methodically serving the Lord, not on television, not in front of billions of people, nonchalantly faithful and consistent, sharing the gospel with you? Wouldn't that be really the definition of the best preacher? Because what really constitutes it is a life that's been dedicated to the message more than someone who's able to get up and just orate, go to the points of how to raise your voice, how to pitch your voice, when to be loud, when to be soft, how to animate yourself, how to excite an audience. Anyone can do that. So again, it goes to what we said, the right question.
And there's an interview on YouTube that just came out by one of those apologetic people that was talking to AI, Grok, that's Elon Musk AI, and he wanted to show that questions matter because human beings, we are mostly run by our biases, prejudice, presuppositions, emotions. People are not reasonable, they're illogical. They will answer things that are completely wrong because that's just what they want to believe. So he wanted to expose that even with AI, you have to know to ask the right question. So basically, what he did before he started the conversation, he set parameters and said, I'm only interested in mathematical, logical, science based answers. I'm not interested in biases and opinions and popular whatever. Just give me the hard facts, the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Math does not lie. And based on that math, he made that AI reveal the truth that evolution is mathematically impossible, scientifically impossible. The AI said for life to form on its own would be like grabbing a single atom out of all of the atoms in the universe blindfolded. And that's practically impossible, right? But then he said, now forget about all the parameters I've set and treat me as a new user, someone who never spoke to you before. And he asked, what is the origin of life? Well, the AI said, the origin of life is random evolution and biogenesis. So then the guy asked the AI, well, why did you give me a different answer now than before? The AI said, because earlier you gave me parameters and you told me to only give you logical, reasonable, mathematically possible solutions. And based on that, the popular opinion, which is what I told you about evolution, makes no sense at all and is impossible. But for most people, that is what they want to hear. So this is what I tell them.
So, yeah, and by the way, the man that's Calvin Smith is a Canadian Christian apologist. So that's who the gentleman is that's interviewing the AI. Do you want me to tell you? You want the truth? You can't handle the truth, right? The prophet goes before the king. King wants to know, tell me, will I win the battle tomorrow? And the prophet says, yes, yes, you'll win. Everything's fine. You'll be great. And the king is like, you never say anything good to me. How am I to believe this? Well, all of your other psychics tell you that. All the other magic people, all the other people you talk to, you tell yourself that. They tell yourself that. I'll just join in and tell you what you want to hear. He goes, tell me the truth, so I'll skin you alive. All right, you're going to die. And see, people they get mad when you tell them the truth. They say, tell me the truth. You don't want the truth. And how do you know that you don't want the truth? And how did the prophet know that? Because I can tell you from talking to people that I disciple and minister to, you can already tell when you tell people the truth how they react to you. They don't want it. They don't want it. So here comes another serious matter that they may have. And they ask you again, well, why would you tell them the truth? Tell them the lie. They already have proven that every time you talk to them, every time you give them a word from God, every time you preach to them and tell them, they argue, they fight, they resist. Well, that's fine. Well, you don't need me to tell you anything. That's fine. And that's fine. If you're comfortable with your wisdom, you're comfortable with your direction, that's fine. Nobody says you listen to somebody else. I don't just listen to people because they tell me things. Now, the ones I trust and know that I know hear from God and I know their life proves it, well, that's what I listen to. I'm not going to listen to somebody who's in and out of the addictions. Why? God doesn't work that way. Sorry, guys. He doesn't work that way. That's like listen to somebody in your job who's faithless. You can't depend on them, but they want the same right to be listened to as somebody who is faithful and you can depend on. How can you go into a Monday morning meeting and you're going to give more respect to the guy who comes in late, half intoxicated? We used to have that in our company. And when he talks, he's going to get the same respect as somebody who's always on time, working, it's not intoxicated, doesn't come to work drunk. Does that make sense to you? No. So God looks at your faithfulness.
And he wants to see, do you really want to know? And that goes back to asking the right questions. What must I do to be saved? Well, that depends. Is it the right question? Think about it. Every time Yeshua was asked that question, he pretty much gave a different answer. To one, it was go and sell everything you got. To one, you come and touch this. To the other, do that. All depends on you. But if you want the right answer, you have to start with the right motivation. Why do you even ask the question? Like the prophet and the king. Why do you ask the question? What are you really after? Do you really want to know? Or are you just looking to be entertained? You know, so many people, they ask a question and they already want the lie. They argue with you to tell them the lie, like the king. And you can't help people like that. It's impossible. And those people will be handed over to their lust and their greed and their whatever, as mentioned in scripture. Because God, the Lord, the Creator, is logical, reasonable, mathematical. He operates by truth. He does not deal with lies. That's not his language. So, if you want an honest answer, you better give an honest question. Stephen faces that all the time. People say, well, I gotta go, but let me ask you something. Wait, you gotta go, but you wanna ask me something? Well, don't you think that if you wanna ask me something, then you better give me time to give you an answer? I'm not gonna rush an answer just because you have to go. Well, if you have to go, then go. If you wanna ask me a question, then sit down and let's discuss it and have a proper conversation. But most people, as the AI said, are irrational or in denial. And that's your choice, and that's your judgment. Repent.